In the spring of 2021, my family and I decided to escape the noise of the city for a few quiet days by Pine Hollow Lake, Michigan. We rented a small Airbnb cabin, described as a secluded retreat with a private dock. The photos showed sunlight on calm water and a wraparound porch facing the trees. It seemed perfect, peaceful, safe, untouched by the rush of everything else. The drive there took nearly 4 hours. The last stretch of road wound through pine forest and patches of open fields where fog drifted low over the grass. By the time we arrived, the sun was setting, bleeding orange over the lake. The air smelled of wet soil and pine resin. The cabin sat just above the water line. You could hear frogs and the slow, steady splash of small waves hitting the dock. For a while, everything felt completely still. That first night was perfect. We grilled dinner on the porch, played cards with the kids, laughed until our sides hurt. The air cooled quickly after dark, and a thin mist began to drift across the lake's surface. Around 11 p.m., after putting the kids to bed, I locked the doors, checked the windows, and lay down beside my wife. The sound of frogs and the distant water pulled me into a half-dream. Then, knocking. 3 slow taps. At first, I thought I imagined it. But then it came again, deliberate, evenly spaced. My body went cold. I nudged my wife awake. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. She frowned, listening. Tap, tap, tap. "It's probably the wind," I muttered, sliding out of bed. "Or a loose branch." I grabbed the flashlight from the nightstand and walked to the door. The beam cut across the living room, out onto the porch. Nothing, just the night, the reflection of the moon on black water. The next morning, we found footprints on the wooden steps, bare feet, wet and narrow, leading from the dock to the door, then back again. I laughed nervously, said maybe a swimmer got lost, but the prints were too small for an adult. We said nothing more about it. The following night, it happened again. 2:03 a.m., the same rhythm, slow, patient. I threw the covers aside, stormed to the door, and flung it open. The flashlight beam hit nothing but darkness and water rippling near the shore. Yet the footprints returned, fresher this time, still glistening. I called the host the next morning. Her name was Lisa. When I asked if anyone else was staying nearby, she paused before answering. "You're the only guest this week," she said quietly. Then, after a moment, "If it happens again, don't open the door." That last line came out low, almost like a warning. Her tone stayed in my head all day. That evening, we sat awake in the dim light of the living room, listening. The clock ticked louder than usual. Around 1:40 a.m., the doorknob began to turn, slowly, not knocking this time, turning, metal squealing softly. My hand tightened around hers. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. Then came a voice, muffled, from just beyond the door. "It's cold. Please, let me in." We froze. The voice came again, weaker this time, trembling. "Please." After a few seconds, footsteps splashed away, toward the lake. We waited until dawn before checking. The footprints were there again, smaller now, like a child's. They ended at the edge of the dock, disappearing into the water. I wanted to leave that morning, but she convinced me to stay. We had 1 night left. "It's probably just kids messing around," she said. I nodded, though I didn't believe it. That final night felt heavier than the others. The air was still, the forest unnaturally quiet. Even the frogs had gone silent. At 3 a.m., I woke to a faint dripping sound in the hallway. The air smelled of lake water, metallic and cold. When I stepped into the living room, I froze. The front door stood wide open. The lock, twisted, wet footprints led from the doorway to the center of the room. My wife came running, flashlight shaking in her hand. The beam followed the trail. The prints stopped behind the couch, as if someone had been standing there, watching. The air felt charged, electric, and for a second, I could swear I heard water trickling onto the floorboards. We left before the sun came up. I didn't even look back at the lake. A week later, Lisa messaged me. She apologized for the inconvenience and refunded one night. I asked if other guests had mentioned anything similar. Her reply came 2 minutes later. 2 before you complained about knocking. One said they saw a boy standing on the dock. He disappeared when they called to him. I grew up in a quiet town called Ashfield, Oregon, the kind of place where people left their doors unlocked and waved to one another at stop signs. Summers were long and lazy, full of lemonade stands and the sound of sprinklers clicking across front lawns. It was ordinary, safe. At least, that's what I believed. Until the summer I turned 12. Our house sat at the end of a cul-de-sac, backed by a thick line of pines that separated us from the woods. At night, you could smell the sap and hear the wind whistling through the needles. That summer was unusually hot. The air felt heavy, and every night, we slept with the windows open, just trying to catch a bit of breeze. It started in June. I was half asleep when I heard it. A faint metallic clinking outside my window. Slow, deliberate, like someone dragging a chain along the pavement. I held my breath, waiting. The sound stopped, then came again. Closer. Scrape. Pause. Scrape. I peeked through the blinds. Nothing, just the dark yard and the orange glow from the streetlight. I told myself it was probably Mr. Alvarez, fixing something late in his garage, but his lights were off. Everyone's were. The sound continued, circling the house, like footsteps dragging metal. The next morning, Dad found long scratches low on the siding. He said it was raccoons. I wanted to believe him. But the next night, the sound came again. Louder, closer. This time it stopped directly below my window. I froze. The scraping turned into a hollow tapping, metal against glass. I lifted the curtain just a little and saw a shadow, tall, hunched, impossibly thin. Something glinted in its hand, catching the streetlight. A pipe, a piece of chain. I couldn't tell. The figure tilted its head upward, and though I couldn't see its eyes, I felt it watching me. Then it melted into the dark, vanishing toward the trees. Dad called the sheriff the next morning. They drove around, saw the scratches, and said maybe it was a drifter. That night, Dad left the porch light on. We slept with the windows locked. But around 12:30, it started again. Slow scraping along the siding, a soft rattle at the back door. The next night, it came earlier. This time, the metallic sound circled the yard twice before stopping. Then, a knock, heavy, metallic, deliberate. Dad ran out with a baseball bat. The yard was empty, but the smell in the air was wrong, not just sap and soil. Something sharp, like burnt metal. By August, the noises stopped, the heat broke, and for a while we thought it was over. We moved the following spring, for Dad's new job. For years, I thought it was just a weird memory, one of those childhood fears that don't make sense later. 2 summers ago, I looked up our old address on Google Maps. The house was gone. A black scar where it once stood. It had burned down. The article said the fire started behind the house, near the pine trees. They never found a cause, but there were comments under the story, from neighbors. One wrote, "We'd been hearing scraping sounds again that week." Another said, "It always started near midnight." And the last one, "I saw a figure by the fence the night before it burned. It was holding something metal.